Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the On the Diamond Into the Deep podcast. And today I'm here with TJ Mathewson of the Marine Layer podcast. TJ, how are you doing today?
What's up, Mahal? Thanks for having me. It is a pleasure to be on with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you, man. Ready to talk some ball, see what we can get going. Lyle might join us later. Sounds like
TBD.
We'll see what happens.
We're hoping. We're holding out hope. What do we think the odds are so we can tell him when he jumps in?
I'm feeling like 30%. I feel like I'm better.
I'll say 50-50.
50-50? Okay, I like that.
So stay tuned to find out.
Yeah, you got to listen through everything to know. So TJ, what a weekend for the Mariners. I mean, series sweep, Cal Raleigh 2 homers, Brian Wu big start, Logan Evans, Emerson Hancock. For you, what's the biggest standout moment from this weekend?
Man, God, throwing a loaded question at me to start. Standout is the fact they can flush what was easily their worst stretch of the season so far so quickly. Someone might throw out there, hey, yeah, the Giants series did stink, and it was pretty bad. I thought the Giants series was much more competitive than the 5 of 6, losing 5 of 6 that they just had to the Blue Jays and to the Yankees. The fact then that they go on the road to one of the objectively probably 3 to 4 best teams in baseball with a stacked rotation, a stacked bullpen, a great lineup, they don't strike out a lot, and that the fact that the Mariners go in there and objectively have the back end of their rotation pitching and still manage to win those first 2 games, and then you have the ability to throw Brian Wu on Sunday, and he shuts down the Padres as well, and you outscore the Padres, I think it was 15-3 in the series. Yeah. You get your home run swagger back, something they didn't do in those 2 series against the Yankees, and the Blue Jays, and you come back and hit 6 in 3 games. That was, I think, would be the most encouraging sign, is that everything sort of comes back at once. Starting pitching slacked in those 6 games. Starting pitching was great in the 3 games against the Padres. Offense wasn't great in those 6 games. Offense was great against the Padres. Yep. Bullpen wasn't great in those 6 games. Bullpen was really good against the Padres. And I'll give a shout out to Dan Wilson as well. We talked about it a little bit for our Monday episode that came out today here on the 19th about some of the, I thought we saw a little bit of growth from him in this series in terms of how he used his bullpen. It was less rigid. It was more aggressive. And I thought it really paid off when they needed it in that Saturday game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I agree on all of those fronts. I mean, for me, watching that series, seeing starting pitching dominate 1 run, nothing, whatever the outing was, and then you go to that bullpen, and that's a little bit nervy, especially after that homestand like you talked about. Just dominant. And the series as a whole, sort of the word I would use is dominant. For you, looking at that series, what do you think is the most important part of that series that needs to continue through the rest of the season? Whether that's the offense, the bullpen, the starting pitching.
Easily the starting rotation, because the starting rotation has not been as good as it was last year. And what people were justifying when they were making a pitch to, say, myself, who didn't have the Mariners in the playoff field at the beginning of the season, is if the offense just gets a little bit better and the starting rotation stays similar, then the Mariners are going to be in the playoffs. And I can sit here and agree and say, yeah, I think that'll happen. The problem is when I thought through at the beginning of the season, I thought there would be regression in this rotation among a number of ways. Either the pitchers don't all pitch as well, or someone gets hurt. So far, both of those things have happened outside of Brian Wu. But what did we just see? We just saw the Mariners' number 6 and number 7 starters go out there and deal against the Padres. Again, a very good lineup. And then you saw Brian Wu, who continues to take another big step forward in his development. That the fact that he's only thrown 6 innings minimum in a start this year is great, given that at this time last year, there were people worrying if he had the durability to go pitch long in outings. And he's certainly put that to rest as well. If they continue doing that and they get George Kirby back this week, which they will, and Logan Gilbert seems like he dodged a major bullet with his injury and he comes back. He was pitching really well to start. He just wasn't being totally efficient. And then Bryce Miller figures out whatever is wrong with him physically and mentally, comes back, and even is like 80 to 90% of the Bryce we saw last season. That is a playoff team with this lineup, with how the guys are currently hitting. And that's I think the ultimate X factor.
Yeah, and I think that is also a big if, though, to see the lineup continue how it is.
That's right.
I think Randy Arozarena, I saw you guys mention it, that he's sort of been a little bit of an understatement. Nobody's mentioned him, but he's having a great season. Cal Raleigh's having a great season.
I even forgot about Randy, too.
Yeah, I mean,
somehow.
And even watching the games, it was sort of thing like, oh, Randy hasn't been that great. And then you look at the stats and it's like, no, he's been really freaking good.
And he's been doing it a little bit differently than he's done it in his
Yeah.
career. He's been a little bit more of a high volume guy in his career, meaning he'll hit for a higher average. He walks, but he's not like a huge walker. This year, the power's ticking up about around a peak Randy level, but he's also walking a bunch.
Yeah.
Which means his average is not going to be as high, but his overall production is going to remain as high because he's still reaching base the same amount, if not more, as if he were to hit, say, 280 or 290. But no, he's hitting about 240 instead, but still slugging the same amount and reaching base and providing the impact that he does in the lineup. And then the fact that he's just surrounded by other guys who continue to produce. Here's a stat I didn't even realize today. In the last month, Rowdy Tellez has been a top 30 hitter in baseball.
In terms of WRC plus?
Yeah.
Wow.
Rowdy Tellez. I was like, okay, I didn't even know that. But that's just like just to point out how much like the floor of this offense is raised because they're just not getting that anchor bad offensive performance from really anybody.
Yeah, and I mean the ceiling is sky's the limits. You haven't even seen, peak Julio at all.
No.
And I think that that's something that, for me at least, excites me. You look at this Mariners team and they've been very good, and they've been one of the top 5-10 teams in baseball easily, especially over the past month. There is still room to grow, and they could be even better than that.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest thing that stands in the way of the Mariners sort of reaching that ceiling, reaching that goal where you want to see them, I want to see them, everyone wants to see them?
The ballpark.
Yeah.
Probably. And that's not even in their control.
Right.
They have been a worse offensive team at home this year. They pitched, I'd say, a little bit better. The splits haven't been as drastic. T-Mobile Park, if you just look at this year, has not been the worst hitting environment in baseball. But if there was one place, I think, and one thing that I could look at, besides the injuries, by the way, injuries is always in every season the number one thing that will derail a team. But I'd say based on how they're currently playing, I would say it is the ballpark. Because then say, hey, the pitching we have is not as good, but the offense is going to get suppressed by a very difficult hitter's park. Well, then that's like sort of the worst of both worlds, right? Where you have regression in one area, and then you have something you can't really change because that's your home ballpark and you're going to play all those games in it. Right. And it's going to suppress your offense. And it's been the course of the Mariners franchise that over their history, they're going to get unlucky by some way. And I could see that being a way this year that it's like, we can't really change the fact we play 81 games at home and our offense regresses a little bit. However, I will say, even if it has been a little bit worse offensively at home, it's not been bad by any means.
No.
For them, it's been actually pretty decent.
Yeah, and even so, you look at this last homestand, the pitching struggled, and that's not something that you're used to seeing or really expect to see at home. You expect the offense to maybe struggle a little bit more than it would on the road, but the bullpen and the starting pitching, you expect that to tick up.
Exactly. And it's going to tick up when your starting rotation looks like Brian Wu, Bryce Miller, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, and Luis Castillo. And that's what you expect. You will expect that for the rest of the season, barring a major injury. And that makes you feel a whole lot better about, okay, we can hold off this regression a little bit. Maybe we'll do it a little bit, but not enough to derail our season.
Right. So as you look sort of at the season as a whole so far, what's the one player that you think has made the biggest difference for the Mariners, disregarding Cal Raleigh?
Biggest difference? I'll say Brian Wu. Yeah. Because without him doing what he's doing right now, what is the Mariners' rotation?
I mean, what is the Mariners at all? What does their record look like?
It would be a little bit worse, for sure. Like, the record would be worse, but Brian Wu by himself is holding up the reputation of the Mariners' rotation by himself right now. And that's not to, and I'm not trying to slight like two of our favorite guys of all time, and Emerson Hancock and Logan Evans, who have both shown extremely promising things. I mean, shout out to those two for what they did this week, weekend against the Padres. You had Logan Evans go 6 shutout, and you had Emerson Hancock showing by far the best stuff he's ever shown in a big league start in his career. Like, massive positives. Yeah. But Brian Wu's been the only guy who's been elite in that rotation. Yeah. And the rotation's supposed to be elite. So the fact he's continued to do that is arguably the most important thing. More important than the offense, I think, and more important than some of the positives we've seen in the bullpen as well. Because without the rotation, the Mariners don't really have an identity as a baseball team. And Wu's holding that up by himself. We got to get this dude to the All-Star game. It's going to be tough, but I think whether it be an alternative or if he just gets voted in to start by the players and the coaches, they need to find a way to get him to Atlanta because he's certainly earned it. He's been the best starter in the most talented rotation in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, no question. Between him, Cal Raleigh, even Randy at this point, you see multiple guys that should be in Atlanta by July. And that's exciting. The Mariners, you look at them a year ago, how many guys did you really think should be and expected to be at the All-Star game?
Who would you think should be in there right now? If I'm rattling off guys, Munoz is there right now.
Yep.
He's one for sure. Cal's there right now. So we have there's two slam dunks right now.
Yep.
And for a team like the Mariners, that's usually a mean amount. If you were to pick a third, the third options are Jorge Polanco, though since he doesn't play a position, that's going to be a little tough. He's going to have to be a DH. You'd have Wu. I think Gabe Spire is definitely pitching well enough, but they don't usually choose non-closers to go to the All-Star game. So that's going to be really difficult as well. I don't think JP's going to get there. He's been good, but his offense has regressed, I guess a tiny bit. He's still been a very productive player.
Yeah, and he had a very good weekend.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at the last homestand.
Enough to be sort of an all-star ahead of some of the mega stars who will just get in based off of name recognition alone. So,
and on that, I mean, is
Randy,
Julio Rodriguez one of those guys, though?
And Julio
on the mega
stars
stars
name recognition. I think he might just do the home run derby again. Why not?
Right.
Every time he's done the home run derby, it's helped him have a great portion of his second half, and he's really good at the home run derby too.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing he hasn't been doing so far is lifting the ball. He's been hitting the ball hard. He's started to cut down on strikeouts and whiff. If he can continue to do those things, and then all of a sudden he can start lifting the ball, maybe the home run derby helps with that, you're going to see the Julio that you all expect to see.
This Julio Rodriguez season has been an experiment on the patience of Mariners fans, I would say.
For sure.
Because, and I don't mean that in terms of demeaning Julio's start, because I actually think Julio's been very productive to start the season.
Right.
It's just, I think everyone's expecting peak Julio now right from the start and for the entire time, which some people, when people use that rationale, they will go straight to his contract. I don't know if you've looked at his contract, Mahal. He's not making that much. He's the 60th highest paid player in baseball. He makes a decent amount of money compared to the rest of us. But when it comes to everyone else in baseball, it's like, no. Instead, you look at all the other things that Julio's doing well, where he's been a plus runner, he's been a plus defender, and he's been walking and striking out at a career high rate. And some of that has to do with the fact he's just swinging at way more first pitches, but he's also done really well when swinging at those first pitches. So are we really supposed to be complaining about that? I don't think so. And here's what else we do know. He's going to be great at some point. He's going to be a top 5 hitter in baseball for like a month and a half at some point this season, because he always does that. So what are we worrying about? I don't get it. Because everyone else in the rotation or everyone else in the lineup is doing their thing and elevating even without Julio doing his best. So what happens when Julio's his best? Well, someone's probably going to slump at that point, and Julio's going to pick up all the slack.
Yeah, and I mean, you almost saw that, I think, on the homestand. You saw the lineup slump. You saw Julio start to heat up. And if you get that August-ish Julio, all of a sudden, those losses that you had against maybe the Blue Jays and the Yankees, all of a sudden, at least a few of those, I would hope, turn into wins.
And if they get peak Julio with this current version of the lineup and a healthier, even not perfect rotation, it goes from maybe American League West favorites to clearly American League West favorites, and then you should feel very confident about their ability to make the playoffs. Right now, even without him, you could make a pretty good case. It's like, look at the rest of the American League. I'm not buying any of it at this point.
No.
I think it's just, right now, personally, I think it's just a bunch of mishmash, and everyone's pretty similar. But with peak Julio, I mean, that Yankee series, like you said, right, it looks totally different because the star power evens out a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, on what you're saying there, is there anyone you're really scared of in the entire league? I mean, the Dodgers, but the Dodgers have injuries afloat. Too many injuries to even count. You talk about Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, Roki Sasaki, just to name 3.
I wouldn't worry about anyone in the National League because the Mariners will need to make the World Series for that to happen, and you and I both know they've never made a World Series. I would still be worried about the Yankees, though. I'm not buying their rotation all that much, or even their bullpen, really. But Aaron Judge he's unbelievable. He is an inner circle Hall of Famer. He has a case to be one of, if not the best right-handed hitter of all time. I'd rather not face him in a playoff series if the Mariners were to face him, because I have a feeling he would beat the Mariners, like he beat the Mariners this past week.
Yeah.
Right? They decide to pitch to him, and he makes him pay, smacks a ball into the bullpen. And that's what it is. And that's And, and that's with them actually having a decent strategy against him the whole weekend, but it doesn't matter because he's Aaron Judge.
Yeah, I mean, you expect him to hit a homer at some point in the series,
Right.
and you gave him the opportunity to after not really giving him that chance yet, which sucked. But I agree with what you're saying. The Yankees do strike a little bit of fear in you just because of Aaron Judge. And it's interesting to think about Judge, the way he's sort of overshadowed in this generation because of the unicorn Shohei Ohtani. But Judge is on pace right now for something unbelievable. He's slugging 770, 780, which is unheard of in this world.
It's Barry Bonds. He's, in fact, like, if you look at the era adjusted stats for Aaron Judge to Barry Bonds, Judge has been better. Or on the same, he's been on the same plane as Barry Bonds. And what makes it more, I would say, awe-inspiring is that the other great player of this generation, you would say, is Mike Trout, best offensive, consistently player of this generation. Aaron Judge is like, from peak Mike Trout, Aaron Judge is like 40% clear of him. 40%!
Yeah. That's
insane.
It's unreal.
It is. It's pretty remarkable. And I think of it for like Judge's size too. The fact he is an enormous human being. Lyle and I were standing there on the field as he walked past us. It is amazing how someone that large controls his strike zone, which is bigger than everyone else's, by the way. Right. So he's at a disadvantage, better than just about anyone else, and the amount of coverage he can get with his swing is incredible.
It's unbelievable. He seems to just hit anything you throw him in the zone. But you can throw him something out of the zone we saw with Matt Brash, and all of a sudden you have that approach, and that's a great moment. And that's something that from that homestand, as somber and just brutal as it was, that moment stands out to you as something that is a positive and sort of saved some vibes as you headed into San Diego.
Yeah, definitely.
I think for me, like, to see the bullpen have that moment was pretty important because you go 0-6 on that homestand, and where are you sitting?
Well, assuming they sweep the Padres, only one game worse, technically. But the vibes wouldn't have been good. You're right. I do think winning, that one game against the Yankees was important, especially if you go back at the end of the year and you only make the playoffs by one game. Dial it back to last year when the Mariners blew a massive game against the Royals where they were up 8-1 in Kansas City, end up blowing that game. And then guess what? They end up missing the playoffs by one game to Kansas City Royals. And those games are all the difference. Even if you're finding a way to scratch one out in mid-May against the Yankees in a series where you're really overmatched, but you still manage to find a way to win, could be the difference between you making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. And at this point, that's what you want. Yeah. Because as they talked about preseason, like, we can't be missing the playoffs by a game anymore.
No. And you've seen that time and time again in this Mariners past 25 years, and it's frustrating. And you look at the past 3 years, those games do matter. Every game matters. As you look towards that playoff push potentially in September and October, who do you see as the biggest threat in the American League West to the Mariners?
The Rangers. I'm not buying the Astros. The Astros pitching staff's been really good, but I'm not buying their lineup for 1 second. No. They've lost so much talent in that lineup. The Rangers, however, have a ton of talent in their lineup. So to see them not hitting well and having to fire their hitting coach, hire our friend of our podcast, Brett Boone, certainly caught Lyle and I off guard when we saw that, but I'm happy for Booney that he got that opportunity.
Yeah.
It always sounded like he wanted that. So the Rangers are super talented when their rotation's at its best. I mean, they have Nate Eovaldi and they have Jacob deGrom, and Tyler Mahle's pitched really well for them this year as well. So I would say that. So, the combination of Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, and those three would present a challenge. I don't think any team, though, in the American League West is like 90-win good. Yeah, so it just kind of muddles everything together, and it shrinks the margins of that. So it would more be, I think, the Mariners mess up if one of these teams is a threat as opposed to the team just being good, right? Someone's going to mess up. It's just which team won't mess up and make the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree 100%. As you look at sort of the beginning of the season, back to something we started with, what for you has been the biggest under-the-radar surprise, something you didn't expect coming into the season that has made the biggest difference and been the most important to you?
I did not expect the Mariners would get this version of Jorge Polanco.
Yeah.
I thought Jorge Polanco would... The way I assessed Jorge Polanco coming into the season is that he would not be as bad as he was last year. But that's not setting a very high bar. I didn't think he was actually going to be good. per se.
No.
And even just with him dealing with all the injuries he's dealt with, he has, still really managed to exceed expectations in this. And he's cooled off recently a little bit, and I think he tweaked something with his knee or his side or whatever is not really feeling well for him. I'm not totally sure. That has caused him to go back to only hitting left-handed, even though last week he was in the lineup right-handed and back in the field, which is not great. But I still think he's incredibly valuable as a left-handed hitter, just a platoon left-handed hitter for how he's hit this season. And it is given something the Mariners haven't had in past years, which is a DH.
Yeah.
They accidentally found their DH. They wanted Mitch Garver to be their full-time DH last year, couldn't do it. They wanted Jorge Polanco to be a third baseman this year, gets hurt, or he was hurt. I think they expected his knee to be a little bit better than it ended up being at the end of spring training, so they end up DHing him. And what do you know? Like, huge surprise that he's good and he's healthy enough to hit left-handed and DH. And the Mariners have benefited greatly from it.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree between him and even JP Crawford, I think, to an extent, a guy that did not have a great season last year, dealt with a lot of injuries, but he's back and maybe even better than that 2023 season, that 2023 version of JP. Mm-hmm. And that in of itself has been a surprise and been great to see.
I hope he keeps it up. I want to see what his stats look like in August. His 23 season is the tale of two halves, really, for him, because in his first half, you saw growth, but he wasn't great. No. And then the second half, he was a top 10 hitter in baseball.
Right.
How is he going to look as the season goes along? What are his valleys going to look like? Are his values going to look like it was in 24, or are they going to look like it was in 23? Right. If JP keeps a little bit more like 23 and his values aren't actually that bad, then he's going to set himself up pretty nicely going into his last year of his contract, where there was like the first 2 weeks of the season, Lau and I talked about, it's like, if JP has a bad year, what do you do with his contract next year? Yeah. Because for a team that is quote unquote cash strapped like the Mariners is, they would think of moving money around a little bit. But if he's going to be good, then the money's totally worth it.
Right. I mean, that's the case with a lot of players. I think it's interesting to look at Randy Arozarena right now. And obviously he's not on contract next season. And you doubt that they would be able to pay him what he is probably going to get on the open market. But then that's a question of how are you going to fill those shoes?
Randy has one more year left.
Oh, does he?
He does. Yeah, it's 1 more year of arbitration.
Well,
but they could still think they don't want to pay the arbitration.
Right.
So that idea is not totally out of the realm, because I think he makes $12 million this year, and then he would make 16 to 17 next year.
Yeah, which is a big increase for this ball club, unfortunately.
But if he hits like this, then they're gonna have no choice and be like, we need our team to be good.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I think just sort of looking ahead again, you're looking towards beginning August, and you are Jerry Dipoto, Justin Hollander, and you're wanting to make one big move for this team to make them better. And at this point, you're looking at it. What do you see the Mariners doing? If that's a player position, where do you see that going?
If I'm going to pick one position, I'm going to say you go after a first baseman. And then reliever is a close second in that.
Yeah.
They could coin flip for the two. I wouldn't really complain that much.
Yeah.
I do feel like, especially a right-handed hitting first baseman is very important. You wanted more out of Donovan Solano, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to work out. I think it's an if, a when, not an if they move on from him at this point. So in that point, they'll have Locklear up for a little bit, but I don't think they think that Locklear is ready to handle regular plate appearances at the big league level. Based on how he performed in AAA, I don't think Tyler Locklear is ready for everyday at-bats at the big league level. So that means they're going to need to go out and they're going to need to acquire a first baseman. I would say preferably a right-handed hitting first baseman, but if you go get someone like a Nathaniel Lowe who plays every single day, you shift Rowdy to either a bench bat or you have him DH a little bit more. Hopefully Polanco's healthy enough to get back out in the field at that point, so you can balance it a little bit better. Nathaniel Lowe's one. There's some other options out there too. He's the one I think that sticks out the most because the Nats really aren't that good at the moment. And the Mariners really did want him when the Rangers made him available this past offseason, but they weren't going to trade him in division. And they instead took, I believe, a lesser package from the Nationals to send him to the National League. But the Nationals are under no such obligation to keep him out of the American League West now. So the Mariners would be a little more comfortable going out and getting him. Plus, he's going to be a free agent, I think, after this season, so he's not going to cost that much.
No. And we haven't seen them do rentals, but I think that they definitely would be willing in that circumstance,
At some
especially if
point,
you're
they
ahead.
need to change their philosophy on rentals. And they did. I think they did a little bit last year. But then again, they might use last year as a rationale to not do it again. Because if you remember, they went and got Jimmy Garcia as a rental reliever. And they gave up, Clase for it. And, and Jimmy Garcia pitched, I think, 3 or 4 innings. And then, Lowe has another year after this year.
Does he?
That would be more along the lines of Mariners trade. But they went out and got Jimmy Garcia last year and barely threw any innings for them. And it didn't work out. And they'd be like, all right, so we can't do that, which if that's your philosophy, great. At some point, though, you need to get the guy to help you win a World Series.
Right.
That's how I think about it at this point. At some point, the window needs to be now.
Right.
Instead of the next 3 years. No, it's now.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And they have the prospect capital to go get really anyone at this point.
I love these prospects. I think this farm system is so fun. They don't have room for all of these guys.
No.
There is not room on the big league roster for 9 top 100 prospects. And someone else tweeted out earlier today that if they didn't trade for Randy and they didn't trade for Luis Castillo, they'd have 11 top 100 prospects right now.
That's wild.
There's no room for them. And by the way, the 2 guys they traded away, super fun players, Edwin Arroyo and Aiden Smith, but nowhere near these guys are helping us win a World Series right now. Meanwhile, Luis Castillo and Randy Arozarena certainly are.
Yeah. And I mean, you have the potential to go do that, especially like we talked about. You look at the American League, there's not really anyone that scares you. Maybe it's Aaron Judge and the Yankees. But even then, you go add a pretty big bat to this lineup or a solid bat, and I think you have a lot of confidence going into a series like that.
I think so too. You won't have to give up those big prospects though for a rental. I don't think.
No,
you go out and get Ryan Helsley
so
from the Cardinals. He's not going to cost that.
No, but I also think that the Mariners are more in the boat of let's not go rental, and they're probably going to look towards next year as well, which is why I think Nathaniel Lowe makes a whole world of sense.
And that's fine if you get the right player. I have no problem with going out and getting multiple years of a good player, a.k.a. Randy Arozarena. That trade seems like a slam dunk. What would Aiden Smith and Brody Hopkins be giving to your big league team right now?
Nothing.
And you still got 9 top 100 guys, including, by the way, people love Brody Hopkins and are really high on him as a prospect, but then you draft 2 first-round pitchers essentially in the draft, and Durangelo and Ryan Sloan, who people love and are both in some outlets top 100 prospects.
For sure.
Works out. And you have the number 3 pick this year, who could also be a pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Jamie Arnold as a real possibility at that spot, and then all of a sudden you got 3 really good starting pitchers that at least 2 of them you're looking at a year, 2 years away pretty easily, in Senja and Arnold. Yeah. So you have the ability to go move guys, and I think that's not even
that's not even including the 2 guys who have been up, who are prospects, who are up in their big league rotation right now. Emerson Hancock, not really a prospect, but Logan Evans, Michael Morales, given he gets stretched out after starting the year injured, he's continued to pitch really well. He's due to be a big leaguer at some point. Brandon Garcia's in the bullpen right now, and I think they see him as a bullpen arm. But it's another pitcher that could come up and give big league innings at this point. So they have options at the minor league level.
And they have options to make impact right now as well. I mean, you look at what Cole Young has done over the past 2, 3, even week.
Dude, how about Harry Ford?
Yeah, an unbelievable.
Ford has been crushing it.
That bomb he hit, what was it, Tuesday? Just unreal.
Both of them got off to slow starts, which I would admit I was a little concerned to see that, especially since Tacoma is such a hitter-friendly environment. You're like, okay, the stats shouldn't be this bad. Now they're leveling out a little bit, which is nice to see. I do think they're going to give Cole another month. I think they'll give Harry at least another month as well. Harry's the big question for me. If he keeps hitting this well, what do you do with him? Because you're not going to bring him up to catch because you have 2 catchers on the roster. They're not going to move Garver off of anything. I don't think they would just bring Harry up to DH. That doesn't make much sense. For a prospect, especially not a DH of a prospect. They tried Harry in the outfield last year. I don't think they really liked what they saw, at least last year. Maybe they'll try again. They haven't tried him anywhere else on the infield. But if he keeps hitting at this point, I don't know.
He can force his way.
I don't know what
they're
going to do.
Yeah,
they could force his way up onto the roster if he keeps hitting the way he does.
Yep.
So we'll just have to stay tuned and find out. I do think as soon as Cole Young is ready, that second base spot is his.
Yeah. When do you see that being for you? Or for the Mariners, really? Mid-June?
Mid-June.
Yeah.
Those guys, I think they like Leo, and Leo will probably be their bench player, Leo or Mastro. They'll choose one to be their bench guy to play second base / third base. But when Cole Young's ready, I don't see either of those guys standing in his way, and they shouldn't.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So to switch gears for the last five-ish minutes here before we finish up, just getting into you and Lyle's Marine Layer podcast, of course. For you, when you guys were beginning that, sort of what was your inspiration? How did you begin that? What was your guys' story for that?
We'd always talked about starting a podcast, I think, as most podcasts start.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, we have a lot to talk about with the M's. We had done a couple versions of the Marine Layer podcast in college. The podcast itself was created by myself and my brother. Like the first iteration of it when we were in college, we had access to all this equipment and we're like, oh, I'm in sports now. Like, let's start a podcast. We love talking about the Mariners. It fizzled out though, because, you know, we couldn't make it work with our schedules. And we didn't really have the same drive and motivation that Lyle and I have now. Lyle had always told me how much he really liked the name. Lyle filled in hosting on that one a couple of times, but you know, it took 6 years off ballpark. Yeah, it was a bit. So then after the 2022 season, you know, Mariners fandom is at an all-time high. The vibes are good. It's like, we should start this. Yeah. Let's give it a shot. We've seen there's some very successful ones online. We see how they market themselves. We see how they do it. Let's give it a shot. So Lyle and I gave it a shot. Tried to stay consistent. I told you pre-recording, like, how good it is to have someone to hold you accountable and say, we're not missing episodes, we're not missing posts, etc. And, you know, we grinded it out. I mean, it probably took a year and a half for us to, like, I feel like really solidify ourselves in the space where people were coming to us to listen, where our content was really taking off. Like, that's a long time. Not everyone makes it through a year and a half of not getting much out of that. So that was, you know, really rewarding to see. And we always wanted to be creative and we wanted to do some social content online. And I think that's what's really separated ourselves from everyone else, is not only the consistency of doing the podcasts, but also the consistency of posting a lot of reels and TikToks and being creative with our graphic design skills and coming up with new ideas and such like that. And we've continued to do it. And I think, you know, that is what has really helped us be this successful and sort of funnel people to listen to the podcast version. But we're, you know, Mahal, we're more than just a podcast. We're a brand, right? That's how you have to think about yourself. You do so much more than just talking to a microphone. It is a big part. It's what brings in the dollars, but it has to be more than that as well. But I'm really proud of what we've done. It's been a massive success, much more than Lyle and I probably envisioned.
Yeah. I mean, I remember finding you guys, I think, middle of the 2023 season. And then I remember seeing you guys skyrocket. Yeah. And I think it was around the trade deadline that I first started listening to you guys and seeing you guys skyrocket. In terms of sort of seeing yourselves grow, what do you think the biggest factor was in that?
Consistency. Easily consistency. The biggest piece of advice I can give to any podcast is don't stop. Don't ever stop. We like, if I just want to give your listeners an idea of like how we ramp up, and this probably helps with a lot of people. So we started, it's like, all right, we got to find consistency, but we can't overwork ourselves at first. Like, we got to get into the rhythm of doing this. So what did we start doing? We did, at the start, for about the first year, a little less than a year, we did one podcast a week and one post on social media, or not a week, a day. Then we went to 2 podcasts a week, 1 post a day. Then we went to 2 podcasts a week, 2 posts a day. And now we're up to 3 podcasts a week, floor 2 posts a day. If we have more, we'll add more. But you know, we expect one of us is going to cut one thing a day. Someone posts in the morning, some posts in the afternoon. When you slow ramp up like that, you get used to the volume of work, and it helps you grow, because the more you post, the more people come to you, and the more you're in their face. And I think the more it really helps your podcast take that next step and reach more people. So I'd say consistency. It is the hardest thing. People flame out after 3 episodes because they realize, well, it is a lot of work to take the free time you'd normally spend hanging out with friends or watching TV, and instead you're doing a podcast instead, and you got to prep for it and do all that kind of stuff. So it's a sacrifice you have to make to get to that point.
Sure. Just in terms of, you mentioned it just now, but prep, what does your sort of preparation sort of look like for an average episode?
Depends on the episode, because we have so many different types of episodes. We do mailbags, we interview people. We'll do more of our analysis episodes on Mondays. So that's more of like diving into the numbers and stuff and recapping a series and just sort of diving into the more specific baseball aspects of it. Interviews, we balance it with the Mariners and the person, right? So we'll do a little bit of questioning on the person. We'll talk about, Mariner specific of what this person's strength is. And yeah, I mean, I love my favorite tools to use when prepping. I love Baseball Savant. I love Fangraphs. I think those are the two best when it comes to looking at numbers. I think what Lyle and I specialize in is that we use numbers to rationalize our opinions. It helps that we have a little bit more information now that we're around the team and around some of the reporters.
Right.
But we do, at the end of the day, come back down to using Savant and Fangraphs to sort of justify, the opinions we put out there. So, it's a decent page of notes to get to that point. But the more you do it, the more you can compact your notes and more you just sort of let your thoughts talk a little bit and give more opinions rather than just sort of reading off stats.
Yeah, for sure. Just to finish up with one last thing, if you have you gave one piece of advice already, but one more piece of advice to someone, maybe on the younger end, someone that is, in their 20s-ish, or in college, one piece of advice for starting a podcast that see you guys are as an inspiration. What is that piece of advice?
Do it and don't be afraid to put your face out there.
Yeah.
It might feel a little embarrassing if someone sees you on your personal Instagram or on you reposting on your personal Instagram, because this is what I went through, right? When you start a podcast and all of a sudden you're like, you're posting stuff to your personal Instagram, like reposting it of you talking about something. You're like, oh my God, did I say that? People are going to see my face. Oh my God. You got to get over that.
Right. Yeah.
You have to be very comfortable with putting yourself out there. And once you get over that, the rest is pretty easy. You just, again, like I talked about before, you got to be consistent. So I'd say that's it's a pretty big hurdle. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to be creative, and the success will come if you continue and you're very consistent with it. And I'd say engage with people.
For sure. Well, thank you, TJ. This has been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Anything else from you before you head out?
We have a live show coming up, Queen Anne Beer Hall, on the 24th, this upcoming Saturday at noon. So if any of your listeners want to come by, we'd be happy to have them. We have giveaways. We'll be watching the Astros-Mariners game right after it. It'll be a lot of fun. So
awesome. Thank you so much, TJ. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mahal. This has been awesome.